Magnus Carlsen is rushing towards his game. He's going to face Vishy Anand in this round, and he is a bit late perhaps to the game, so he is rushing towards the board. This is happening at the Global Chess League in Dubai. Magnus enters the fan zone, and everyone there wasn't expecting to see him there. Magnus is such a big icon in the world of chess. You have the phones coming out. Magnus moving towards the playing hall. He's playing for the SG Alpine Warriors against the Ganges Grandmasters. There you have it. Entering inside the tournament hall, he takes a right turn, and of course everyone gets the fair play check, including Magnus Carlsen. The players are ready. Both of them have taken their chairs. Vishy Anand, 5-time world champion, the man who beat Kramnik, Topalov, Gelfand, and then losing his title to Magnus in 2013, and then Magnus kept the title for 10 years. Off we go. Pawn up to e4, e6. Magnus goes for the French defense. Very interesting choice. Mainly played because Magnus wants to win this game for his team. e5 played, pawn to c5, and he pushes the bishop away. This is known as the French win-hour variation. Knight c6. This is something that Magnus has played before. In fact, he had played it against Anish Giri at the World Blitz 2022. And this is exactly the same line. Vishy is well prepared. He pushes his pawn. He's asking Magnus, isn't your king side a bit too weak? Magnus says, I'm well prepared. He goes with the queen. That's a little new move because against Anish, he had gone directly for f5. He's attacking the pawn on c3, and Vishy defends it with his bishop. Now, Magnus plays his pawn up to f5. The point is, you mustn't take here. If you take, the knight comes out and black is doing well. So he moves the queen back, and Magnus gains some more space in the position. Vishy takes the pawn so that Magnus doesn't close it down completely with pawn to c4. And now Magnus kind of developing his pieces. Knight comes out to e7. Vishy also finishes his development, brings his bishop out. The main imbalance in this position is black having a better pawn structure, but white having more possibilities with the bishop pair and the ability to break some point with the pawn coming to c4. The knight comes to a5. Magnus tells Vishy, you cannot break c4 easily. Vishy says, let's trade the queens. Your queen is too powerful. My queen is doing nothing. I would like to trade it. Magnus takes, king takes. The position is very slightly better for white, but Magnus knows how to handle such positions. Pawn comes up to a4. And the main idea now is, yes, king f7, connecting the rooks. And then slowly you figure a way out to create some counterplay. Rook comes to b1. And pawn moves up to d6. Vishy plays his bishop to c1. What a very nice maneuver. He wants to bring his bishop to a3 and then plonk it to d6. Knight to c6. And one could go bishop a3. Yes, that's what Vishy does. He plays his bishop to a3. And now the knight goes to d8. Look at how Magnus is maneuvering it. He wants to go knight b7, knight c5. Vishy comes to attack the knight. The knight comes to the aid of his comrade with knight b7. And now the knight jumps to d4. So very interesting play by both amazing players. They're maneuvering. And rook to b8. Very interesting. Maybe he wants to put his knight on c5, and later on, if you take any of the knights, the b file opens up. Vishy goes knight b3, offering a trade. An interesting idea could be to take, and put your rook to c8, followed by a5. But instead, Magnus goes knight to c4, and he tells Vishy, you want to trade, my knight is very strong. Vishy actually takes it. Pawn takes, the knight is attacked. And now the knight has to move its opposite colored bishops. Maybe the chances of this game ending in a draw are huge. However, if you look at the match situation, Magnus absolutely must play for a win because his team is in trouble. They are actually trailing in the match, but how do you play for a win in such a position? It's not like you're facing some beginner as your opponent who's going to blunder. You're facing the legend, Vishy Anand. Vishy plays his pawn up to a5, asking Magnus, do you want to open the queen side? My pieces are well placed. Magnus says, no thank you, I'll keep it closed. For the time being, the position is closed. Rook comes to the central file. Vishy is playing such logical chess. Look at his pieces, so nicely placed on these central squares. Bishop goes back. And maybe it's time to double down the d file. Well, he first goes knight e2, which is a nice move. The knight is well placed here so that the pawn is also defended. Pawn up to a6. And maybe it's time to double. Yes, he goes rook to d4. And there you have it. Magnus Carlsen looks at the screen. For him, it's very important to make a decision here whether he should trade the rooks. The more pieces that come off the board, the less are his chances. And so there's a screen there which shows all the 6 boards of your team. And there he's watching all the games before taking a call. How should he continue the game? Vishy, meanwhile, looking very relaxed, taking a sip of water. He knows that the position doesn't warrant black to play for a win. Everything's under control. Emotions are running high. How should Magnus Carlsen play here? He goes rook d8 and he offers a trade of rook. He is worried. He is definitely worried. The world champion needs to strike. The other rook comes in. And now Magnus chops off one of the rooks. You can take with the rook, you can take with the pawn, you can take with the knight, you can take in any way. Vishy decides to take with the rook so that more pieces get traded. And will Magnus play rook d8? I don't think so. He goes bishop c6, makes a lot of sense. Improving the bishop, keeping some pressure here. Vishy comes back to d2. And now, how does Magnus continue here? Whoa, he plays g3 and look at Vishy's reaction there. He knows that Magnus is turning up the heat. Knight takes the pawn, then the rook comes over. And then if you make the knight move, then you lose the pawn. Otherwise, the rook comes to g4 and put some pressure. For example, bishop goes back, rook comes in, rook d4, and somehow you are hanging on, but it's not so easy. So this pawn is for activity. Pawn push to g3, and if you take with the king, then there is a check and you lose the g2 pawn. So it's very important. Oh, Vishy says, I'm not taking your pawn. I'm just going to move my king away, and I'll see how to handle it later. You're not going to bait me into this, Magnus. Rook g8 played by Magnus. The game suddenly becoming sharp because this pawn on h5 is a bit weak. Pawn on g3 is a bit weak. Vishy moves his knight here, attacking the bishop on c6. Very interesting move. And Magnus comes here, pings the knight. Wow. Now one of the ideas in this position is bishop d6 played. The bishop is hanging. You need to move that bishop away. But already Magnus seems to be better. Bishop comes in. The threat is to take, and win a pawn. And so Vishy brings his bishop back. And now look at this maneuver. Bring your rook up, play your knight to d8 and to c6. Yes, he starts off with rook d5. Magnus playing really well. Vishy finds a great move. He's bringing his king to the defense of his rook. Knight d8. King is now defended. And Magnus is going to find knight c6. Yes, he does. Look at this variation. If you take the knight, I take your rook, king takes, bishop takes, and it looks like a draw, but it isn't because you're going to lose this pawn as well as the pawn on h5. So knight e2, fantastic move found by Vishy. Takes, king takes, and the point is, black can take the pawn here, but Vishy is going to take his own pawn. This is brilliant chess. The position is still equal. But now the bishop comes in and attacks the pawn on h5. Vishy says my pawn is defended. I don't have anything to worry. Magnus attacks another pawn. He defends it. He comes up. He attacks. Well, are the players going to agree to a draw? Not really. Magnus is going to fight till the very end. He brings his king back. Vishy comes back. He's asking Magnus, where's your next breakthrough? Well, Magnus can reroute his knight from e7 to d5. He does that. But now Vishy should not allow his knight to come to d5. He must simply chop it off. And once he chops it off, yes, he does. King takes. This is not going to be an easy way to win for black. But black has a clear plan. He can go king d7, king c6, king c5. He plays. But Vishy goes to the other side. He goes king c1, king d7, king b2, king c6, king a2. He waits so that when Magnus comes up here, he will come up here. Also, Magnus can enter this position, but then there's no entry to the e4 or d4 squares. And so Magnus plays king d5. Vishy goes king a3, king c5, king b2. And now, guys, the main thing is there are two ways to play. One is to play b4. Okay, first he just goes here and attacks the pawn. Goes and attacks the bishop. The bishop is improved. King comes up. Now, in order for black to win this, he has to go for b4 break. One break is to take, king takes, and then win this pawn. However, this endgame after c3, king takes a5 is a draw. It's a fortress. And so, after pawn push forward, pawn takes, which has happened, Magnus intends to go king d4. He doesn't intend to take the pawn. The game is become so sharp. Now, king d4 needs to be played. Yes, he plays it. He brings his king in. Now Vishy adjusts himself in the chair. He needs to calculate very accurately how to win this. c3 check is the correct move. King goes to d3. And now, in order to create some play, because black's plan is very simple. If he gets the time, he'll go king d2, king e1, king f2, and the knight is trapped here. So in order to create the play, you have to push your pawn forward. But after you push ab, a6, a7, the bishop is controlling the queening square. Where is the counterplay? Takes a6. Vishy knows where the counterplay is. He says that, look, I have another idea up my sleeve to take the pawn ef, and my e pawn would also rush down. So it's a very, very sharp endgame because black also has his plan of pawn push and then queening here. However, if he does that without king d2, then the white king could have come back and sat here. So first Magnus takes control of these squares, and now a7 played. If he is to play b4, then Vishy has this very nice move check, dislodging the king from this square. And so Magnus cannot push b4 just as yet. He needs to wait. He brings his bishop back to d5, and now the only drawing move is to give knight f1 check so that the king has to move away, and then you get back, and that's a draw. That's a draw here. Vishy is calculating this. He's looking at it. If knight f1 check, king e1, he's going to move his knight. No, he actually sacrifices his knight. He sacrifices it, and he says to Magnus that if you were to take it, I'm going to push my pawn here. This pawn you cannot take because I'll make a queen here, and otherwise I'm pushing this pawn forward. What an endgame this is. Magnus chops off the knight and Vishy must absolutely push his pawn forward. There's no other way to play this position. But has Vishy calculated everything in the position? I'm sure he has. He's just making final checks here. Whether black's b4 and c3 is very powerful or not. Staying very focused. Magnus Carlsen is also calculating. There are too many lines to see. e6, b4, e7, takes, king moves, c2. And now which pawn to queen? Do you queen this pawn? Do you queen that pawn? Too many variations to look at. The position is too complex. Vishy has roughly around a minute on the clock. Magnus has 21 seconds only. He pushes the pawn to e6. Magnus, of course, makes the forced move, pushes his b pawn, e7, pawn moves forward, and now, of course, you must take the pawn. Now, for Vishy, there's a choice between this and this, but he sees king a3 will be met with a queen check, and so he goes king a2, c2 played, and now a8 queen. He makes this queen, and his point is that c3 will not come with a check later, and you can see Vishy there. Sigh of relief, both players smile at each other. When was the last time this happened? When two world champions smile at each other in between a complex game. But I think what they both see is that after takes, queen here, if now you make a queen, then there is a stalemate with queen e2, king takes, and the game is a stalemate. Wow, that is what has been seen by Vishy Anand and Magnus Carlsen, and that's why he smiled there. Now, there is a winning move for Magnus, and that is to push his pawn to c3. It's very difficult to find, but the main idea is you make a square on b3 for your opponent's king, but he plays the most human move, bishop e4, which is actually a mistake. The reason for it being a mistake is that after check, the king has to move. No, he plays bishop d3, and now a very important move is to play queen b6. The point is, if you make a queen, I'll go queen e3, which is my idea all throughout, or queen f2. First a check, yes, Vishy finds it. Bishop comes in, and now queen b6 very important because you need to keep an eye on the h6 pawn as well. No, he blunders with queen d4. The reason for the blunder is not that you make a queen, because queen is anywhere a draw after queen f2, and you just have to sacrifice your queen because it's a stalemate. But the win for black is if Magnus finds under promotion. Oh, he finds it. He finds c1 knight. What a move by the world champion here, world rapid champion Magnus Carlsen. Knight c1 check. Brilliant, brilliant chess here. Vishy did not see that coming. Under promotion is often missed by even the best in the business. Where does the king go to? Now, he has to go up. He needs to play because if he goes king a1, there's knight b3 check. And Vishy is so surprised here that in spite of this being the only move, he's taking his time. He can go to king b2 as well, but that is also losing. King a3, pawn moves forward. c3. You can see Vishy's hand shaking there. He did not see that coming. Magnus Carlsen is actually striking for his team. Knight comes to e2, and the beauty of this position is that the bishop and knight work perfectly, and the pawn queens. Vishy resigns. Magnus Carlsen wins this. What a game! What an end game, guys! This was absolutely tremendous play by both these players. Magnus Carlsen finding each and every opportunity there. Vishy's knight sacrifice actually put the board on fire. However, in the end, it was not enough because Magnus under promoted. He hit two pieces, covered his king so well, and then the c pawn just moved down the board. This endgame will go down in history as one of the best played by two world-class players. It also shows how beautiful chess is. Suddenly Magnus remembers, oh my god, what's happened with my team? And the SG Alpine Warriors won it with Magnus's victory.